All righty, what's up, everyone? I'm Noam, and I'm going to be honest with you, I don't know what I'm doing, but I do know that I want to help our UX community grow and thrive through more conversation, more information, and more inspiration. And when it comes to building community, UX research community, UX community more broadly, I am incredibly inspired by Alec Levin or Levin?
It's whatever you want it to be, but usually
Whatever.
Levin.
Levin. People deserve to get their, for other people to get their name right. I'm inspired by you, man. Alec is the CEO and co-founder of the UXR Collective, and he's right here in the studio, so to speak. Hello, Alec.
Hello. Thank you for the lovely intro. It's great to connect. It's always fun chatting with you. Looking forward to this. It should be fun.
I'm excited. Your partner Maggie was supposed to be with us today, but she is rather pregnant, and
she is.
You're about to be a parent soon.
Well, we thought we'd go back quite a few months when we realized that this baby was going to be due within like 4 weeks of the conference, and we're like, what great timing! Couldn't get any crazier than this, right? A baby and a conference 4 weeks from each other. Couldn't possibly get any crazier, and then the coronavirus happened. So it's a wild time to be living. I don't know what to say.
Pretty wild time. I agree with that. Oh, look who came in. There. It's my daughter.
Hi there.
So we have a lot to talk about. But before we get into things, if any of you are interested in being part of this growing UX community, getting more information about it, getting inspired, again, we're going to talk about that today. If you have any questions, please send your questions on YouTube, Facebook, or Twitter. I think YouTube works best. We'd be happy to take them. And all of the information we'll talk about today is in the show notes for you. So let's just start with that. So I'm curious to understand, first to start, kind of how you even got into this current role, this current venture. Looking back at your career so far, what kind of motivated you in the first place, and what's changed for you since?
It's a good question. I mean, to sort of start from the beginning, I think a lot of people fall sort of ass backwards into research, and sort of I'm no different. I remember when I got my first gig out of university, and I was joining this tech company, and we were building software for biomedical scientists. And suffice to say, we weren't very good at it. There's just not a lot of traction to go around. I mean, since then, the company has done well. It was acquired by Mark Zuckerberg's charitable foundation. Yeah, it's called Meta. And, it was interesting to me because I was really passionate about the problem that they were working on. I was really interested in it as what I thought was a future grad student. And I thought it would be really good to have a functional tool that helps me find the right journal articles to read, basically. It's kind of like that. And, we were building stuff, and it just wasn't working, and it wasn't resonating. And so for me, the obvious thing to do was just to go and talk to some graduate students doing biomedical research and just put it in front of them and ask them, just some questions and see what we can figure out. And that was kind of my foray into research for the first time. And I found it incredibly enlightening. And after a while, it really occurred to me how much progress could have been made, how much more progress could have been made, how many mistakes could have been avoided if research was part of how we made things. It would have fundamentally changed the trajectory of the company. It'd be probably in a very different place today. I mean, it ended up in a good spot, but there were a lot of challenges.
Yeah.
And so somewhere along those few years that I was working there, I just decided that was what I wanted to be spending my time doing, was research, figuring out more about how people were experiencing things and how to make better stuff for them, right? How to deliver more value, how to make more enjoyable experiences, all that kind of stuff. I'm not skilled in any way in the areas of design or any of the other real crafts, if you will, of making beautiful and elegant things. But this is a way that I found that I could really contribute, and it really excited me. So that was kind of the beginning of research for me.
And so was there a tipping point for you where you transitioned from focusing on the research itself to indeed kind of building a UX or UX research community, creating conferences, everything you're up to these days? Or is it actually different at all from what motivated you at first? Like maybe it's the same. I don't know. How do you think about that? Did you make a pivot, or is it not really a pivot?
It's a funny story. Is the answer. So when after I finished with that role, I decided that I wanted to, like I said, I wanted to focus my career on research, and I wanted to spend time making it easier for people to do more research. And the way I thought I would do that was to start a startup and to make a research tool. I was not a very good startup founder, and I was not very good at making this tool. It was a couple of really challenging years with not a lot of progress. One of the ways that I thought of for finding customers to try and talk to and see if they might be interested in my tool was to start a meetup for, it was called User Testing Toronto. And we did a couple of them. It was a lot of fun. I loved it. Had no interest whatsoever in what I was building, but it was just like the time of my life. I had a great time spending time with people who also thought that this kind of work was important. And when I was done with the startup and I was totally burnt out and I was ready to move on, I was trying to think about how to get myself back on track and get to a better place. And I was thinking about all the things that I had done over the last couple of years and was looking for what were the things that really inspired me, that I really loved to do. And so, that those meetups really stood out for me. And so I sort of relaunched that and started UX Research Toronto. And that became, it started as a very small, crappy meetup, and it slowly became better and better and bigger until eventually a small group of us decided, like, why don't we try and do a conference? And kind of the rest is history, like the strong tailwinds of, our industry's growing interest in research and people more and more understanding the value of research every day sort of carried us, was a big reason of why we are where we are today. Putting on sort of the world's largest research conference, having this big Slack community and all the other things that we do. It all sort of started as a side project of just like, what did I love doing when I was running my shitty startup?
You mentioned the value of research, which I think is becoming clearer and clearer to teams, to companies, to leaders. What about the value of community? I think we both care a lot about growing the UX community, the UX research community. What's the value in that, if you could articulate that?
I mean, well, I think the value in it is mutual, sustained personal growth for all the individuals that are part of the community. And that has many knock-on effects. First and foremost, generally, if you're able to grow professionally in your own way, that will make you probably happier and increase your earning potential, and that's all wonderful. But it also has the knock-on effects of making the companies that we all work with better, right? And being able to deliver value more effectively, at lower costs, faster. So there's all these positive effects by having the ability for people to talk to each other, share their problems, share what they've learned. And I think it's especially important in the research community because, even in small and medium-sized companies, there are probably more than one designer and more than one product manager, right? There are natural mini communities that form within companies of like-minded and like-skilled individuals. Generally speaking, that is not a privilege that researchers have because often we're one or two people in a company of hundreds, right? I was talking to some folks. Some folks that I talked to were saying that they'd guess that maybe for every researcher, there's probably 100 other employees at a given company. I don't know if that's true, but it doesn't seem that doesn't seem outrageous. I'll say that. So for us, we actually have to go out of our way to find other people to connect with and learn from. And if you don't take the time to do that, it's going to really hamper your ability to grow as a worker, but also to just be happier and have people that you can sort of rely on for support. And I fancy myself as somebody that knows a little bit about research. I feel very confident in my abilities to execute as a researcher. And there have been times in my career not so long ago where, because of the situation I was working in, like, it was a little bit crazy and there wasn't a lot of understanding of what research's role is. And I had to go and ask some friends, like, is it crazy that we don't have incentive budget? Like, is that a crazy thing that I don't have anything to give to people who give me their time? I'm pretty sure it's crazy, but everybody that I'm working with now is making me feel like I'm the crazy one. And then, to have friends that are gonna be like, no, that's insane. That's totally nuts. That's not a you thing, that's a them thing. I'll be like, okay, good. Right. I'm not a crazy person, right? And so,
yeah.
No matter who you are, having other folks to grow with and rely on and learn from is just fundamentally critical, especially for researchers. So, I think that's one of the reasons why so many research communities have grown so organically and so quickly over the last little while. And it's not just us. It's like the Mixed Method Slack community and their podcast. It's the ReOps community that has grown like wildfire, and so much great conversations happening there because people desperately need the opportunities to learn from other folks because they just don't have that where they're working right now.
Yeah, I totally agree. And the numbers you mentioned add up from my experience. And I've never really thought of that notion of some people having micro communities within their company, whereas other people, depending on their role, researchers included, might find it more difficult to have that.
Yeah.
I work in one of the epicenters of technology here in Silicon Valley.
What? Silicon Valley? I've never heard of that.
It's okay. It's okay. It has its downsides, but it's okay all in all. And
do you guys do technology there?
We do some stuff.
Do some technology? Okay,
we do some stuff.
Interesting.
Some hardware, some software, some other things.
Yeah.
Not sure we make that much silicon these days. It's more like apps and stuff. But anyway, even though this is one of the epicenters, still, when you think about how many companies around here have large research teams of 10 or more people, 20 or more people, you can probably count it on a couple of hands.
Yeah.
Most of the research teams are very small, if they even are a team or a team of one. So
yeah,
that's a great point. Maybe this is a comparison we don't really need to make, but how do you think, what's the state of the UX research community or communities compared to others, if that even matters, compared to other professions, other roles?
Yeah.
When you think of growing community, do you have any kind of benchmarks or other examples you look to think about how to do this?
Yeah, I think it's not so. I don't know how much it has an influence on sort of what we do on the day-to-day, but one thing that I look to is like the change and growth in the design community as being, I look at them and I say they're 10 years ahead of us, right? And it wasn't so long ago that designers were, looked at as, oh, you guys choose the colors for the icons, right? And I'm gonna tell you how the whole thing works, and then I want you to make the boxes. Like that wasn't that long ago, and I'm sure there are still companies where that is how design works today, but it's much more rare than it was. And you can see like design went through this transition over a period of 10 years or so, or 15 years, where it goes from lipstick on the pig kind of thing of someone's already made the decisions around how this thing functions and how the experience is going to be implicitly or explicitly, and then somebody has to go and do the visual elements of it and try and fix it up, really, the decisions that other people have made. And now like design is like such a mature function in most technology companies, where you have VPs of design or chief design officers, right? Where people understand that design for a lot of companies is like an area of strategic competence that requires thoughtful planning, that requires you to think into the future, right? Especially if you're doing, I think, probably more along the lines of consumer-oriented stuff. It's really important to understand, what are the trends and interactions in different generations of people and whatnot. How are you going to prepare for serving these new generations of customers, for example?
Yeah,
I think we're 10 years behind that. And so when I look into the future of research, I see, when I come up with my best guesses of what research might look like in the future, I think one thing that I think we'll see over time is the chief research officer role. And within that sort of department, within that person's purview, will be a bunch of different research functions that will exist, specialized to helping different people with different skill sets. There's people who have a lot smarter than me and a lot more experience than me that have thought about this in quite a lot of detail. But I think what over time you'll see is research functions that currently exist under other companies will migrate under to this new role. So for example, the market research function, I think, will eventually be working for a VP of research or a chief research officer. The design researchers will eventually, it'll be the same thing. And I think the reason for that is we're slowly seeing, we're seeing over time researchers focusing on problems that are of increasingly higher level of abstraction, right? So if you go back 10 years, we're working basically as glorified QA engineers, right? We're usability testing things as they're about to be shipped to see if there are any glaring issues that make it impossible to use the product, right? Yep. And then we started testing envision designs and mock-ups and prototypes and stuff like that. Because, hey, if we can do that with engineered products, we can probably do that with these design mock-ups, right? So we're going up a level of abstraction. And then, all of a sudden people realize, hey, you guys are really good at interviewing people and figuring out what people want. Maybe you can help us figure out what features we need to build. So now we're going up a level of abstraction again. And so where I think this ends is that research serves the entire business, right? And so what a lot of people don't realize that researchers are good at is producing knowledge, right? Producing important knowledge. And we have a toolkit. We have toolkits filled with different tools we can use, quantitative and qualitative, moderated and unmoderated, all these different ways of producing information that we use to generate strategic sort of insights, if you will, that then we are able to deliver to our colleagues so that they can make better decisions, right? And I think that over time, you're just going to see more and more of this happening. And so coming back to your question around like sort of what sort of the analogies are, I think, are, I think design is 10 years. If you want to know where we'll be in 10 years, I think we look to design because they're ahead of us. But if you want to know what it was like doing research 10 years ago, you can look to some other fields. Like I think content strategy is a good example of that, where people are really starting to realize the value of having a craft specialized in writing words and having consistency across everywhere. So if you want to look at what research looked like 10 years ago, go look at UX writing or content strategy, whatever the right terminology is for it. And I think you'll see sort of that we're right in the middle of those two.
We have it's a compliment and a question all in one from Ahmed. So thank you for the compliment. Thank you. So do you have advice on how to kind of start these conversations around research in communities, areas, cities where design is still 10 years ahead? Have you thought of that?
I think so. In my experience, and I've actually had quite a few conversations like this. There's times where I've done a little bit of consulting here and there. And also when I was doing my startup and trying to sell shitty research software, you learn you learn how to have some of these conversations. I think the first thing that you got to do is sort of, when you're talking with somebody, right? initiate the conversation and try and get an understanding for what their understanding of research is, right? So, if you're trying to convince somebody that they should invest more in research or do more with research, you can't, there's no one size fits all instrument to convince them or persuade them. You got to take a look at where they're at right now and then help nudge them in the right direction. So, for example, a lot of folks will sort of at this point understand the value of doing evaluative testing, for example, right? Yeah, it makes sense. Like, obviously, if we're going to design something and engineer it, we should make sure that people can use it. That seems like intuitive. So why then would it not make sense to be able to learn about what people's interests and values are before we start making the thing, right? So really breaking it down, what their understanding of research is today, and then trying to rebuild with them a new sort of vector for what research can do for their business, right? If you're able to, sitting down with somebody with a prototype, learn about what the flaws of that prototype are, then what's to say that you can't do the same thing without the prototype, just trying to understand what the problems with the product are, right? And if we're able to do this with a user, then why not with a new employee who's, you've got a churn problem with your own internal employees? Why can't you use those same tools and methods to figure out why people keep leaving, right? So there's what you come to realize is, and over time you can get them to the point, is that research isn't about making a feature work better. Research is about how we develop an understanding of what's true about the world, right? And so, these are like really just a set of skills and tools for producing knowledge. And so, breaking that idea of what they think research down with them collaboratively, right, in a non-judgmental way, and then trying to build it back up with them, right? Using logic, using reason, and using, good anecdotes that I think will help them understand the value, even from their own experience.
Yeah. Thanks again, Ahmed, for that great question. Appreciate it. Keep them coming, everyone who's watching.
I'll just add one more point on that too, by the way.
Oh, yeah, sure.
One thing that we as researchers are terrible at is persuasion. We're really bad at it. It's really, and this is sort of an area.
Why is that?
I think it's a really good question. I think because we study people and we spend so much time trying to understand people's point of view, right? And when you're doing research with a user, there's no you shouldn't be bringing any judgment into it, right? Just because they can't figure out how to do one thing or they think your feature is stupid, even if it doesn't make sense, right? You'd be like, okay, this is what a real person thinks, and we should take that seriously and internalize that and see if there's ways we can help them. But at the same time, like when it comes to our coworkers, sometimes the decisions that they're making are not in the best interest of the entire team, in our customers, all that kind of stuff. So we got to find ways to convince them. And relying on the feelings and the practices that we use with users don't make sense for that, right? So, I think that just because of who we are and what our discipline is, we feel an aversion to persuasion and really to politics. But it's critical that we learn how to do this stuff, because if we want to grow in influence in the companies that we work at, if we want to be able to grow to newer and greater heights and newer challenges, we need to be able to tell people who don't understand us and don't understand what we do why our role is important and how we can help the rest of the team achieve their goals. And if we can't do that, then we don't deserve to be directors and VPs and chief whatever officers. So I think this is something, so if you're going back to Omid's question, this is something that is worth practicing again and again and again. How do I convince somebody that research matters? And it's something that anybody who wants to grow really fast in their career should really focus on finding opportunities to keep practicing those muscles, keep building that muscle memory of how I get people not just bought in, but excited about doing research. And you can understand some of the reasons why that there's going to be an aversion to research, in the sense that just look at, if you're a researcher, you say you join a new company and you're pairing with this product manager who's been working on this product for 2 years, right? And you say, hey, I want to do a test to see how good our product is. this guy doesn't know anything about you. This guy doesn't know how you work. He doesn't even know, or she doesn't know if you're competent at research. Yet you could bring back results that completely blow up his project or her project, right? And so there's a risk there, right? If I let this person do the research and it comes back negative, like that could cost me my promotion. That could cost me influence in the company I work in. So of course, people are going to be hesitant to want to work with you as a researcher until you get better at persuading people how you're going to be helpful and how you're going to support them in their achieving their objectives. End rant.
I want to put the kind of the spotlight back on growing our community. If anyone wants to find out more details about what you're up to, there's links in the show notes on YouTube, so you can go there. But I want to ask you, if people watching this now or afterwards want to take part in this process, they want to have a more meaningful part in growing the community, whether it's working with you or doing something else. Do you have kind of a call to action for all of us here, for people who are interested in being a more integral part in the community, doing something, taking an active part in growing it? What are your thoughts on what people can do right now or later on when they feel more comfortable, and who should be doing it?
Yeah, so I'll take the last question first. I mean, everybody who loves research and has an interest in research should be looking at it as their responsibility to do something. It doesn't have to be with us, doesn't have to be with anyone in particular, it could be on your own, but everybody has something to contribute. Especially if you come from a background that other researchers don't come from. You're bringing some unique perspective to our discipline. The last couple UXR comps that we had, our most popular talk, it was the same person 2 years in a row, basically. Her background, she doesn't have a psychology degree or an HCI degree. She comes from trauma counseling. And she gave last year and the year before that, two of the most inspiring and insightful talks that I've ever seen about research. And so, and the reason, of course, we're talking about Viviane Castillo. If you don't know her, you should follow her on Twitter. She's awesome. And the reason that she's able to do that is because she comes from a work background, a professional background that's different than a lot of other people. So she's able to come into our field and provide a different perspective. So not only is I think everybody should, everybody who wants to should and can take an active role in doing something. But for those that are different, it's even more important. You have even more to contribute than everybody else. So I would highly encourage people to find some way. Obviously, I would highly encourage everyone to come to our now 100% virtual conference, UXR Conf Anywhere. For those that are laid off or are students or now no longer have professional development budget, we're extending $99 tickets to anybody who cannot get their company to pay for going. Awesome. So there's a form on our website right now. We're going to make it even easier. In a couple of weeks, you're just going to be able to just hit the buy ticket button and just grab a $99 ticket on our system. I highly encourage you to come. There's going to be lots of ways to connect and network with other people. It's a good way to start building your own personal networking community. But the final thing is, no one's going to give you permission to do, or no one's going to invite you to come and start doing something. You just get started. Right? So there's different ways to do it. You can start a local meetup, for example, or a local Slack community for researchers, a little hangout, a coffee chats, now all over Zoom or whatever it is. You can start your own research project. So one thing that we've done recently is we're almost done a report. It should come out, it will come out this week, but we did a report on researchers' salaries that we're going to be publishing this week. And that just came from a question from someone in our community who reached out to us and said, hey, do you have any data on researcher salaries? And we didn't. So, we decided to team up and see if we could produce some. And so now we had over 1,000 responses, and now we get to publish some real data on how much, or whether, to help people understand whether or not they're paid well or not, which as far as I know, nobody has done before, focusing just on research. And that just came from a Slack DM. So,
incredible.
Whether it's putting together your own research project, organizing virtual coffees. It doesn't have to be big, and it doesn't have to be a lot of people. Our first meetup way back when, it was like 25 people. I had to give away half the tickets for free. I had to invite my mom because there's so few people. Like, it's just embarrassing a little bit, but that's how a lot of this stuff starts. And it's it doesn't have to be big right out the bat. It just has to be something that's meaningful to you and maybe the two other people that want to participate.
I want to go on the record saying this. You and Maggie and a few others, you also just started, and you ended up creating what, in my opinion, is by far the best UX research, maybe just UX conference in the world, and an entire community as well, because it's much more than a conference. It's much more than a meeting. And then, so this is, mid to end of April 2020. We are in this crazy global pandemic, which we can't stop talking about. And you not only did that, but you completely converted the conference, or in the process of converting the conference, from an in-person conference in one of the loveliest cities in the world, Toronto.
Yeah, that's not bad.
It's not bad. It's not bad. Bunch of greatest ready restaurants, if anyone wants a recommendation.
That's true.
You created kind of, instead of that, an incredible remote UXR Conf Anywhere conference.
Yeah.
And we have to talk about that. Kind of, what's that process been like of taking an in-person event, which really is top-notch, and completely shifting it to a remote event? And kind of, if you can share anything about that experience, I think it would be super interesting. And also, what do we all have to look forward to
For sure.
Coming up,
Yeah, so let me start off with what has to be said, which is without the team that we have, this is not possible. I am so far from competent when it comes to creating experiences. That's not my skill set, but we have an incredible team. Maggie's leadership from an experiential point of view and a logistical point of view is like second to none. She's incredible at it. And then we have a team of folks that are really, really thoughtful about trying to create the right experience for every one of our stakeholders, be it our attendees, be it our speakers, be it our sponsors, whatever it is. I think there's two ways that you can take an event remote that's in person. So the one of them is very easy and very straightforward, which is like, do a Zoom call, right? You can just do that, and it'll function, and there'll probably be a little bit of hiccups and whatever, but it'll on the whole work out okay. I think, for us, we have 3 goals, and we measure ourselves on this every conference. So 3 goals for everybody that participates in our conference is 1, they should learn things that are actionable and make them better as a researcher. And this is part of our post-conference survey as well. Like we ask these questions in particular ways so we can really see how well we did, right? We want them to meet new people and build their own research community, because that's a very powerful thing for your own personal growth. Not that you're part of a big community where there's lots of researchers and you don't know them all so well, but they actually meet people that are researchers that they now have new relationships with that they can rely on, is 2. And number 3 is have an awesome time, right? Those are our 3 goals. If you want to deliver to the 10 out of 10 degree, and again, this is our first time doing this. We're working our tails off. It's been a crazy few months. Work hours wise, definitely been the most challenging in my career, and for a lot of the folks on the team. But if you want to deliver on a 10 out of 10, or that's what you're going to aim for, then you actually have to re-envision the entire conference experience from scratch, because the medium is different, right? For example, if you want to help people connect with each other and you're in person, it's very simple. You just create a lot of white space in your program and shove people into the lobbies where there's food and drinks and cool things to look at. It'll happen naturally. It's super easy, right? Yeah. But if you want to do that online, that's way harder, because when we're in person, it's just much more natural to make a relationship. And in 5 minutes, you can build a new friendship. But when you're online, it's way, way harder, because you're not there together. There's just some you're from a psychology background. Maybe you understand it better than I do at some sort of like academic level, but we just struggle with building real relationships when we're doing a video call, for example. So what we've done to accommodate for that is our networking and sort of community building programs are going to extend for weeks. So instead of that happening just during the 2 days of the event, we're going to use the time before the event and time after the event to help people build those relationships over a longer period of time. So that's our solution to that problem. When it comes to the content itself, so luckily, we're incredibly fortunate that all of our speakers have agreed to participate in this remote event, and they're going to be delivering some amazing content. When you're in person watching a talk, the person talking is the star of the show, and the slides are there to support them, right? And so they could be static and whatever, because you're not even really focused on them. It's something you'll glance at from time to time. You're focused on the person with the microphone. But when you're watching a video or a live stream, it's a completely different experience, right? You have distractions all around you. You have your cats, your kids, your coffee, right? It's harder to pay attention. So you need to make the actual show much more alive. And so what we've done is hire a production studio to help professionally record and film all of our speakers delivering and you're going to go through this experience, so you can let me know how it goes. Professionally record everything, and then we've also got animation and graphic artists who are going to help bring a lot of these static slides to life and make them feel more alive, so that when the speakers are delivering the storytelling, they can actually watch what used to be static slides and see that move around the screen, and it's more engaging that way. So the whole point is like the goals remain the same, the content remains the same, but the way that you deliver the value changes completely once you go from in-person to online. And so, like I said, we're extremely lucky to have so many talented people on our team, under sort of Maggie's leadership with this. Samira has been great, Emily, Jane, Rebecca, Kyle, who's our internal UX researcher, who's been reaching out to all of our attendees, trying to understand expectations, and us doing our own primary research on how to deliver the right experience. We're lucky to have such a great team. And, coming back to that community question, that's why setting up these small coffees and Slack communities is really important, because you can start to build relationships and trust with people that can then help make something that is bigger than just what you could do on your own.
Yeah. And maybe it is time for full disclosure. I was and will be again a speaker at UXRConf, and I'm very honored to be in that position and very glad I am, because again, as someone who cares about, taking part in the community, helping it grow, educating and mentoring others who are interested, there is no better opportunity to do that than to be part of the community you've built. So thank you for that.
That's our pleasure. I'm excited for your talk. It's going to be a really good one, a really important topic, as we've said.
Thank you, sir. Most people don't like to give predictions, but maybe aspirations are okay. I'd love to ask you about your aspirations for UXR Collective, for UXRConf. What do you hope to be true in a few years from now, in a decade from now? Where are we going to be at? Or where do you hope to be at?
So I think in terms of what I hope research looks like in the future, my hope is that more and more organizations see the incredible strategic value of not just having researchers, not just having research teams, but having research leaders at the leadership level in their companies. You think about if you think about all the, anybody who's worked in a technology company before, probably any company, but my background's in mostly tech companies, the amount of wasted hours really from engineering teams and product teams, when you look at like what the end value delivered from whatever amount of work, whatever number of sprints, the amount of like zero value sprints or close to zero value in terms of the bottom line for the business that happens is like extraordinary. It's like, I don't know, in my experience, it's like north of 50% of all sprints deliver marginal or no value to the business or to the customer, which is crazy. Right? That's so much. I think that research will play a huge role in starting to take that percentage of value generating work from the people doing a lot of the creative work and crank that up closer to 100%, which I think is extremely important for not just for those companies and the customers, but really for our entire economy, right? The less wasteful we are, the more we're able to innovate, the more we're able to produce, the more we're able to produce things that really move the needle for people around the world. So that's one thing. In terms of what I hope we're going to be doing, I think our sort of vision and mission is pretty straightforward. We want to see research grow in a healthy and organic way where everybody feels included. And there's different ways that we can do that. Obviously, our conference is well known, and that's one avenue that we have. We also are doing smaller things like our remote Rise in Research events that take place once a week in the mornings, where you can just come and get a mini talk. It doesn't cost you anything. Over a Zoom call, someone delivers a little talk. Everybody gets to know each other, about 20 people. So we do those every week. But I think there's different areas that I think that more impact can be created, and we'll be experimenting with these things. So whether it's helping, a lot of researchers don't have real mentorship and professional developments for research at their company, either because they're the only one, or maybe their team is really small, or maybe there's not really a research leader, there's just a bunch of individual contributors. So being able to support the professional development growth of individual researchers is something that we're really interested in. And then some of the other stuff that we'll look into is like ways of increasing the value of any researcher. So it might be new tooling. So for example, one thing that we're going to roll out at some point is Kyle, the UX researcher on our team. He's really good at math. He's got a stats major from undergrad. And he's been talking to us about how like many really straightforward math concepts that seem really scary to qualitative researchers who are primarily qualitative like I've been, are actually really easy to learn. Can we help teach other people that? So like things like that, building tools, small things that I hope at the end of the day will make it easier for researchers to see their worth, to prove their worth, and to grow wherever they're working. So what that looks like in practice, we're going to experiment with some stuff. We're doing research right now on with members of the community, trying to understand where are the areas that we can provide the most value. But it's anyone's guess at this point.
Before we end, I'd be disappointing myself and Maggie probably if I didn't bring this up. I don't know if you saw in the show description, there's a casual mention of rice. Did you notice that?
No, I didn't notice that. Oh no. Oh.
So you have accomplished many things in your career. You have led research and product. You've built these incredible conferences. And again, I urge everyone watching this to check out UXR Conf and UXR Collective. But one thing you do not know how to do well is cook a basic staple in any kitchen, and that is a pot of rice. What happened, Alec? What happened? What happened that this is the situation we're in today? And talk about making predictions or aspirations.
Yeah.
Is 2020 the year when you'll be
the bowl of rice?
The year of the bowl of rice. You're going to have an expanded family soon. Is this going to happen or not? Do you have to go on record and tell us all?
I will make a prediction about the bowl of rice, but before I do that, I'll tell a story. I think, as we've talked about, it's sometimes easy to see folks who are naturally spent more years in the workforce as having accomplished whatever. Everything seems so straightforward. In retrospect, this nice line throughout their career and whatnot. So I'll draw you another dot in the rice story, which is a few years back, about 10 years ago, I was a canoe tripper. I took kids out on camping trips for a summer job.
That's awesome.
Love that. Camping is one of my favorite things that I never ever do anymore. To Algonquin Park in Ontario or other places. Anyway, so the actual canoe tripping stuff I'm fairly competent at and enjoy. But one of the things that you're also responsible for is providing food for the campers. And
oh no, You were starving innocent children, weren't you?
This
Oh
is
my
a bad
lord.
one. On my very first
No.
trip, keep in mind, I'm like a degenerate teenager, don't know any, never, I used to make grilled cheese. I'd like put a slice of cheese on a piece of bread and put it in the microwave. Like that's the quality of food that I would make myself. And I did not know that you needed to strain pasta before adding the rest of the ingredients in there. And so we had some incredibly sloppy noodles and some very upset 14-year-olds on that trip. And then I had some very serious remedial lessons. So to tie this back into rice, I think it's a little ambitious to look at 2020 as the year of the bowl of rice for me, but I think 2022 is in the cards.
Well, there you have it. And thank you for the honesty. You know, we all have our shortcomings. What can we do?
Something like that. Yeah.
Let's end there. Did you want to just give like one final shout out or mention of how people can find you and your team and what people should do to be more of a part of this community?
Yeah, so a couple things. First of all, big shout out to the whole UXR collective team. I promise that y'all have no idea how hard they've been working as we've been like quietly trying to figure this whole remote situation out. And they've done a fantastic job. And so I'm super proud of all of them. And it's awesome to get to work with them. So that second, in terms of if there's anything that you think that we can do to help with something that would support the growth of research, you can reach us sort of anytime. My email address is alec@uxrcollective.com. I respond to all my emails within like 45 minutes because I'm a crazy person like that. You can also hit us up on our Slack community, DM me, DM one of the folks on the team if you're part of our Slack community. We're always looking for ways to learn from the community and learn from other researchers about what we can do better. We take all the feedback that we get really seriously, and we're trying to do more generative research on where we can be more helpful. So if you have any ideas, please feel free to hit us up. And then the second thing is in terms of just getting started yourself. If you need a few words of encouragement or a gut check on your idea or whatever it is, again, please feel free to reach out. But it starts with just you taking action that first time. Maybe it's starting a newsletter, right? And you have 2 people reading your newsletter. That's a good start, right? If it's organizing a Zoom coffee hangout for researchers, that's awesome. Just because something is small doesn't mean it's not incredibly important. And in fact, starting small is one of the best ways that you can just learn about where the needs are among our community members. So all I'd say is just get started. And if there's anything we can do to help, please reach out anytime. We'd love to hear from you.
It's great advice, which I will take myself. And on that note, again, I'm not sure what this is. It's a studio. It's a studio in a random bedroom in Mountain View, California, where I get to talk to incredible researchers and research leaders. If you want to do that too, then I'd be happy to. Or if you need anything else, I'm at noamseg@gmail.com or at noamseg on the Twitter. Get in touch, ask us questions, or come have a UXR conversation about anything that's on your mind that would interest the rest of the community. Thank you so much, Alec, for a wonderful
pleasure. Thank you for the question, Omid, and for everyone else who tuned in. It was cool. And I hope to see you all around soon.
Until next time. Bye for now, everyone.
Cheers.